From Vermont Public, this is The Frequency. I'm Mary Engish. It's Saturday, April 19th, which means you're listening to a special weekend edition of the podcast featuring the Capitol Recap. Coming up, the latest on the state's motel voucher program. In recent weeks, the latest chapter in a long-running political fight over Vermont's motel voucher program played out in the State House. But in the background, lawmakers have advanced a bill that would fundamentally overhaul Vermont's response to homelessness, and it could provide a potential off-ramp to the mass use of motel rooms as shelter. For this week's Capitol Recap, housing reporter Carly Berlin joins Vermont Public's Peter Hirschfeld to break down that bill and the long history behind it.
As this problem of unsheltered homelessness has ballooned in Vermont over the past 5 years, Carly, this motel voucher program has become a huge part of Vermont's social safety net. This bill passed by the House really reimagines how it functions. So what are we looking at? How would this differ from what we know right now?
It's really a complete overhaul of how Vermont's homelessness response system works right now. So think of the system now as being centered on the state. The state is making decisions over who gets funding for building and running shelters. And of course, they run the motel voucher benefit program. What this bill would do is instead give all of that funding and decision-making power over to 5 regional anti-poverty nonprofits. So these are the community action agencies like Capstone in Central Vermont, Champlain Valley Office of Economic Opportunity, and so on. Those groups, after like a year-long planning process, would then get to decide who gets this funding, how we respond to homelessness on the regional level. Fundamental change is going from centralized state response to homelessness to regional, decentralized, privatized response.
I can recall a moment last year when the problem of homelessness was particularly acute, when the legislature and the administration wanted to give a bunch of money to these local agencies and have them take on a more pronounced role in providing shelter. They said, we don't have the staff to do this. We don't have the operational capacity to do this. Has that changed? And what are they saying about this new approach?
Yeah, this is really a longer running conversation in Vermont. For over a decade, there's been this back and forth over should the state be the main actor here? Should local organizations be taking the lead role in responding to homelessness? Even just right before the pandemic, before this motel program totally expanded in size, there was a proposal from the Department for Children and Families saying, we actually want to give this over completely to these regional and local groups. So now the community action agency directors are saying, we can do this with a caveat. We need more time. They want to see a 2-year-long implementation period instead of just a year. And of course, they're saying we need money to properly do this in the long term. And then on the other hand, there are local shelter directors who are saying this is actually going to be really inefficient. This creates conflicts of interest when you have these community action agencies that are both providers and funders. And, there's also this fundamental concern that this basically amounts to the state totally stepping back from its responsibility in leading Vermont's response to homelessness.
Yeah, accountability is a big question here, right? Up until now, accountability has fallen to the legislature and the Scott administration, and it's been a real political thorn in their side. To what extent does this proposal represent an attempt by the legislature to sort of kick responsibility for this issue somewhere else so they don't have to deal with it anymore?
The kind of language we're hearing from Democratic backers of this bill and also from administrators in the Scott administration is, decisions are made best on the local level. Communities know the problem and they are best equipped to respond to it. Of course, on the other hand, you have critics and these local shelter directors saying, actually the state has acted as this really critical backstop when our local groups have been overstretched. And, the state stepping back is really potentially an abdication of responsibility.
I asked the governor at a press conference earlier this week what he thought of the proposal. He said his concern is cost, as it has been for a long time with the motel voucher program. The Senate has to weigh in as well. What sort of momentum do you see around the legislation, and what kind of chances does it have for becoming law before the end of the year?
Right. I mean, I've heard those same concerns around costs from Republican legislators. The bill right now would basically maintain the same level of funding we've seen in recent years, but distribute it differently. So, and we very well may see those numbers change as this works through the legislative process. But in terms of momentum, we've also heard, for instance, the commissioner of the Department for Children and Families saying, we actually really like this general direction. We like handing over this responsibility to these regional groups. And to hear, any kind of synthesis between what Democratic leadership and the legislature wants and what high-level members of the Scott administration want, that has not been a common phenomenon on homelessness, right? And so we'll see. The devil is in the details, of course, and we'll see where this ends up.
That was Report for America Corps member Carly Berlin. Carly covers housing and infrastructure for VT Digger and Vermont Public. She was speaking to Vermont Public's Peter Hirschfeld. Thanks for listening to The Frequency today. Today's episode was edited by Liam Elder Connors, and our music is by Blue Dot Sessions. I'm Mary Angish, filling in for Mitch Wortley. We'll talk to you Monday.
This is Tanya Mosley, co-host of Fresh Air. You'll see your favorite actors, directors, and comedians on late-night TV shows or YouTube. But what you get with Fresh Air is a deep dive. Spend some quality time with people like Billie Eilish, Questlove, Ariana Grande, Stephen Colbert, and so many more. We ask questions you won't hear asked anywhere else. Listen to the Fresh Air podcast from NPR and WHYY.